All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the channel, here for another review of Gods of the Arena. This time we are on episode 4 entitled Beneath the Mask. So, in this episode, the House of Batiatus is caught in a power struggle between father and son. At some points, we will see what could have been between the father and the son, that being Titus and Quintus. Also, Lucretia reluctantly agrees to her husband's risky plan. We also have Gaia's reckless ways catching up with her. And also, Gannicus finds himself on unstable ground throughout this episode. And we're going to talk about that and the episode as a whole. So, but before we do that, guys, we got to start with the score. And if you're new to the channel, the scoring system is 0 to 5, 0 being trash and 5 being a masterpiece. So, guys, I gave this one a 3 out of 5. I thought this was a solid episode. I thought it hit its apex towards the end, so it's really ramping up for the last 2 episodes to definitely knock it out of the park. So let's go ahead and let's talk about the episode. So, like I mentioned, father and son, Quintus and Titus. I mean, we start this episode and we see what could have been as far as their relationship. Like, they're in the stands, they're watching the fights. And I mean, they're feeding right off each other. And I mean that in a positive way. Like, Quintus is pointing out the trident and the net. They're like, hey, we don't have one of those fighters. And the dad talks about, I prefer the Mamillo and this style. It's just a gimmick or whatever. But, Quintus tells him, he's like, look, in order for us to be considered for the games, we have to have variety. And this is a style that we need. And they come to agreements that they will introduce the style to the house, but they will give it to one of their lesser bodyguards, or not bodyguards, but lesser gladiators. So, and we also get to watch Asher and Dagon in the arena, and Dagon puts on a great show. Asher, not so much. He's actually gets saved by Dagon, and he tries to show out. After Dagon's kind of put the dude down, he takes the axe and bashes the dude's head in. But like, it's one of those where nobody's too thrilled about it and they kind of move on or whatever. But at the same time, of course, this little moment that the father and son is having, Quintus kind of has to go and ruin it by complaining about not being in the Povinus or whatever with the elites. And, his dad once again tells him that that's not a spot for us. Okay. This is where we belong, down here. And, I prefer being down here. And then we also get an introduction to Vedius's champion, Carabas. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I'm probably saying it. I'm butchering it. But he makes light work of his opponent, and he shows how brutal he is by ripping out the guy's heart. So, I don't know. Keep an eye on that guy. I'm sure we're going to see him again before this season ends. And at the same time, while these fights are going on, out in the market, you have Lucretia and Gaia. And like I said, while they're roaming around, they run into Petronius. Petronius is somebody that Gaia knows from Rome. Her husband kind of had some dealings with him, and he's an eligible bachelor. So it's definitely someone. It's definitely someone she could maybe latch on, who could be a sponsor for her or whatever. The thing about Gaia, she reminds me of the character Ginger from Casino, Sharon Stone's character. Like, at the end of the day, she's not really about the love. She wants to be taken care of. And at the end of the day, she's somebody that probably could never really love someone. I mean, the only person I think she truly loves is Lucretia. And, we'll see how that goes later on in the episode. But anyway, she makes a connection with this Petronius. He's looking at her like, I don't know you or whatever. You know how it is? Like, you may have ran into somebody, you hadn't seen them in a while, and you briefly met them, but it appears that they had more of an impression on you than you did on them. That was going on right here. Because, I mean, he's looking at her like, okay, yeah, I remember your husband. But then she goes, yeah, this is my friend Lucretia, and his eyes light up. He's like, Lucretia? The House of Batiatus? And he starts talking about those intimate delights. And, he's wanting to, sample some of those intimate delights. So, like, At this point, it's very dangerous because, or excuse me, Titus is in town, and so they can't just openly be like, yeah, come on through, So she basically says, I'm gonna pass the word to my husband. So they all get back to the Ludus, and the ladies tell Quintus, hey, yo, look, we know your dad put a kibosh in the whole planned Primus with meeting with Tullius, they shut it down. Basically, they were onto the scheme with Varus. They shut us down. But we do have one more chance, and it's with this guy Petronius, who, he's cool with Varus. So, like, if we put on a show for him, we back in there, baby. And, like, Quintus doesn't even hesitate. He's like, yeah, make it happen. And so they're like, what about your dad? Don't worry about that. I'll take care of Pops. Don't worry about that. But at the same time, when Titus returns back to the villa, he asks for a word with Gannicus. He brings Gannicus up. And essentially, he's trying to get the measure of Gannicus. Is this guy truly a champion that could represent the house of Batiatus? And, he simply just asks him, like, basically, what is it to be a champion? And Gannicus gives the answer that he wants to hear. And, Titus is not fooled by it. And that's what I've been saying. Like, when I compare these guys, I go, this is the part of Gannicus that's missing. Like, for example, like Gannicus' mindset versus Crixus. Like, Crixus's mindset is the mindset that Titus would want. This guy is fighting not only for the honor of himself, but he's fighting for the honor of this house. Like, he understands the mantle of wearing the champion, that he doesn't just represent himself, he represents the house, and the house comes before him. Whereas you have Gannicus, he's just fighting for the love of the game. And you have Quintus, who doesn't care why he fights, long as he wins. So you can see where the oil and water situation happens with Titus and Gannicus. He's like, this man is no champion of mine. And if I could do a sports comparison, think of the U.S. men's basketball, Olympic basketball team. Yeah, they won the gold, but, are they in their heart of hearts, when they win, are they honor bound because, hey, I'm doing this for my country? Or is it just, yeah, I'm I got selected and I'm doing this for the love of the game? Or juxtapose that to the U.S. hockey team, where, it's for them, it's patriotism. Like, the guy who made the game-winning goal, the first thing he talked about was the country needs it. So, like, the country. So I look at it that way. Both teams accomplished the goal. They won the gold medal, just like Gannicus and Crixus. They both win. They're both champions. But for Titus, yeah, it has to be more than just winning the battles. And so, Titus basically makes it very clear that, he's no champion of mine. And so that's going to be very interesting, as you have someone like Crixus who's surging, and he's already made it abundantly clear, like, what his intentions are. So those two are definitely on a collision course against each other. So some other things I wanted to talk about before moving on involving the Petronius situation is, one thing, when Quintus gives the approval to do it, something the ladies bring up that is very important is the simple fact that, there's not going to be a man here. And once these guys start getting the baser needs, we're not going to be able to control them. So he's like, hey, let Salonius sit in. And so they allow Salonius to come in and kind of oversee, be that male figure that's there, and keep a close eye on that, because that's going to be very important to what happens at the end. Because let's just say, in the previous episode and in this episode kind of solidifies it, that Salonius is tired of being Batiatus's toady. He's starting to look out for himself. He's starting to figure out that, like, this dude is taking advantage of my friendship, my kindness for weakness. I got to start thinking about myself. I got to start thinking about, what's good for Salonius, and what's good for Salonius may not necessarily be good, or what's good for Quintus or Batiatus, what's good for him may not be good for me. So I got to start thinking about myself in these situations. And so yeah, it's something to keep an eye on, and we'll get back to that. And so, also something else I wanted to talk about, since we're still stuck, we're with essentially with Gannicus. Gannicus and Melita, you know, they have a brief interaction, and Melita, she does everything she can to avoid Gannicus. And Gannicus, he's trying to, you know, approach her because boy is sprung. I don't know what Melita's got. She got that good or whatever, but the boy is sprung, and he just can't let it go. And Melita tells him, like, look, what happened between them, it should be ignored. We should not discuss this. This isn't going to go anywhere. Essentially, she's like, I love my husband. Flash forward, she goes to her husband's room, and, you know, when they getting it on, she's fantasizing about Gannicus. So she definitely feels it too. And we saw when the action happened, why it was going on. She was feeling, you know, she was feeling it. And but after it was over, she instantly regretted it. But it goes to show, like, this is something she's been thinking about as well. But, you know, she's kind of like not acknowledging the feelings. It's like, if you don't acknowledge the feelings, then, you know, nothing will come of it. And we'll talk about that later, because something does come of it. And we'll talk about that later. Now, I want to move on to the portion of, as I like to call it, the intimate delights. And so for this plan to come forth and for it to be successful, we got to get Titus out of the situation. And Quintus has already said, hey, I got that covered. I got it covered. And so what he ends up doing is he takes his father to Neapolis. I hope I'm saying that right as well. You know, under the pretense, or under the guise of scoping new gladiator talent. And, you know, they get there, and all the gladiators are shit. Also, there's an Easter egg for Spartacus. So, like, one of the slaves they look at, you know, the guy's like, well, I got, you know, exotic, never seen before. I got a Thracian. And we know Spartacus was a Thracian. And Batiatus is like, well, nah, you know, they're really unruly. They can't be, you know, essentially saying they're difficult. They're hard to keep in line, and they have issues with Gauls. So, like, it's kind of a telling us what's going to happen down the road. So it's kind of a nod to Spartacus in a way. So, like I said, it was nice for the show to do that. So let's get back to the ludus and the intimate delight. So, of course, all the elites, well, most of the elites of Capua show up along with Petronius. They arrive to the house of Batiatus for a night of pleasure. And, you know, it's going down. It's going down. Unfortunately, once again, I forgot just how sad and tragic Diona's situation is. But once again, we see her. They got her with antlers on, or, you know, horns on, and Roxas is just oh man, I just hate talking about it, but you know what he's doing to her. And she, like I said, she's just out of it. You know, she's dead inside. And so it's rough to watch, but, you know, that's how it was in that world. And the night is going, if you're not Diona, but the night is going pretty well. And then all of a sudden, Tullius shows up. And that's the one thing I was thinking about while all this is going on. And they actually mentioned this earlier in the episode. It's like, Lucretia's worried, like, we can't keep doing, like, word's gonna, who already, like, all these people, they know about this. It's only going to be a matter of time before, you know, Titus finds out about this. But anyway, Tullius shows up. Clearly he was not invited. But what we do find out is none other than Salonius. Salonius was the one who told them what was going on. And like I said, for some reason, Salonius, I mean, I gave him a break with Titus showing up. He didn't think, you know, he's so far away, didn't think he would show up while they were corresponding. But he tells Tullius about this, and he acts surprised that he showed up. I mean, come on, man. But, you know, and Tullius puts him in his place or whatever. You know, and so Tullius comes in, and he just hijacks the scene. He blows up the spot. He sucks all the oxygen out of the room. Like I said, it's this ominous feeling once he enters. And so he wants to start taking part in things, and he calls out Gannicus, and he wants to put on a show with Gannicus. They're like, all right, get the wooden swords out. He's like, I can be what I want. I'm supposed to be a god tonight. And the gods, you know, at Mount Olympus, they be clanging metal. So get the metal out. And so, of course, Enemeus is there, and he's he's already uneasy about all this. He's like, we're dishonoring the house. And so he gets steel, but he tells Gannick, because Gannicus is like, ha ha, like thinking he's going to have some fun with this guy. And Enemaeus is like, look, man, just go out there and don't kill this guy, just flatter him, but do not kill him. And so they start fighting, and Gannicus right away, you just see the skill. Like Gannicus could have killed him probably I counted about 4 or 5 times, probably even more if he really wanted to. But he's making Tullius work for it. Tullius is talking shit. And then there just comes a point where Gannicus, he starts to, drop his guard, and this dude starts cutting him all over his body. And eventually Gannicus gives up and gives the missio. And then this dude Tullius is about to kill him, but luckily Lucretia intervenes and is like, he's given the missio. And he ends up, ending things. And, they take Gannicus down to the Medicus. Now he's down at the Medicus, and Melita escorts him down there. So they get a brief moment alone, and they share a kiss. And she's kissing him back. So they definitely feeling each other in that scene. It's not good. It can only lead to tragedy, but we go back to the festivities, and Gaia, and like I told you guys, Gaia's recklessness, man, it eventually catches up with her, man. So she steps away with Tullius. She's like, hey, let me distract him. If I can distract him, the night can continue. So she's going to take one for the team. And so, because she's like, Tullius has always had a thing for her. And so, they get back in a secluded room, and, she's using her feminine wiles. She's starting to seduce him. Tullius, he's kind of, always when I was, he's like, it was different when we was younger. I was the one chasing after you, but, now the tables have turned, and of course, the seduction's going on. And then he tells her, I want you to give Batiatus a message, or Quintus Batiatus, but you get what I'm saying. And the scene cuts. Something before I go back to what happened, something else that I just thought of was, Dagon and Asher sold that boy out. So Asher has come to the realization that he's basically on the chopping block. And the only reason why they keep him around is to translate for Dagon. And so he's feeling the heat, and he's pissed because after their showing, Asher didn't really get as much money as Dagon. And, so they're standing in line, and this Roman comes by, and he wants some of that boy cunt. And so, Asher is doing the translation, and the guy's like maybe Dagon thinks, oh, he wants me to do him, and it's the other way around. But like I said, he's not realizing that. No, it's going to be you. And then what makes insult to injury is Asher adds in that he likes it rough, and he basically saying, hey, if you want to go all out, I have no objections to that. So he sold his boy out. So, man, God, dog, man. And even Roxas looks at him like, dog, you a dirty dog doing your homeboy like that. And so getting back to the Gaia situation. So the house is clearing out. Salonius is like, well, I'm going to step out. It looks like everybody's gone or whatever. And he even asks about Gaia, and she's like, no, everything's cool, Salonius. Should be all right. And you could just tell, Salonius knew what happened, but, he took off. And Tullius emerges, and he basically is like, yeah. She's like, where's Gaia at? He's like, yeah, nah. He basically is like, you know what? Gaia has a message for you. You should go see her. And so Lucretia is looking for Gaia, and she sees the red wig out in the hallway, and she steps into the room, and there Gaia is, her head split open down to the white meat. She's gone. She's in the afterlife. So it looks like he bashed her head, gave her some blunt force trauma, killed her. And so, of course, Lucretia is distraught. And at the same time, Titus comes back home and he sees Lucretia all distraught. And then he sees the evidence of all the degeneracy that had been taking place throughout the evening while Batiatus took him to Neapolis, where he starts putting two and two together. Like, you took me away because you was going doing this shit. And so Titus finally like, here's the deal. Here's the story. God damn it. She got drunk and stumbled and fell off the cliff. Everybody knows she drinks. She's a drunk or whatever. End of story. And he like I said, he blames Lucretia for this. And then he basically tells Quintus, like, here's the deal. You want to find common ground with me? Get rid of this wife. And if you don't leave her, you're going to leave with her. Basically, I'm cutting you off. And then we get them taking Gaia's body to toss over the cliff. And of course, Lucretia gives her a kiss on the forehead, says farewell to her friend one last time, telling her at the same time that she promises to get vengeance upon those who have done this to her. This is the first time we get Lucretia from Blood and Sand. Like, this is the turning point for her. This is where she turns into who we seen. Because if you notice, these first couple episodes, she was somewhat of a nice person. And I won't say naive, but just like I said, somewhat of a very nice person. But this turned her. This turned her to the Lucretia that we see in Blood and Sand. And yeah, that's where the episode ends. It ends right there. And so looking forward to the next two episodes, because I think, like I said, they're going to knock it out of the park for those last two. So, guys, like I always say, if it's for 1 minute, 5 minutes, or the whole damn video, I appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to view my content. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe, smash the like, get in the comments, let me know what you thought about this episode. And guys, it's your boy P signing off. I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.